Kimbell's enormously fortunate to own not only a splendid example of what is generally called a modello, a large, highly finished terracotta model, but also two sketch models, two bozzetti from Gian Lorenzo Bernini's hand. And these are smaller models that he used to create and think about compositions very, very quickly. And this bridge, built back, I think, about 134 AD during the time of Hadrian, had been essentially the same for 1700 years. And the Pope at the time decided that it was high time to refurbish the bridge, and of course called on Bernini to come and decorate it with a series of angels, 5 on each side, that were to be holding instruments of the Passion. And it's the type of project that Bernini could not handle himself. He couldn't execute 10 angels single-handedly. He realized that he had to delegate things to assistants. He began the project by focusing on 2 angels, angel with the Superscription, which we have here, angel with the Crown of Thorns. And this is really where he directed all of his energy in determining the design so that the overall bridge had a nice visual unity. We have found very secure proof that these 2 angels indeed were made as a pair, which is unlike any other models that exist for the Ponte Sant'Angelo. We can look at models like this and read them as we do drawings, looking for the distinctive working gestures of the artist. If we didn't know anything about the Ponte Sant'Angelo, but we knew a lot about Bernini and how he modeled, we could look at these and sort of instantly identify them as the work of Bernini, and you can take us through that.
Well, for one thing, they were modeled out of solid clay. They haven't been hollowed at all, which is a characteristic of how Bernini worked his sketch models, or bozzetti. So he would wedge a single mass of clay. Wedging is this process of driving the air out of the clay. It's like kneading dough. So you roll it over and over on itself and compact it and drive all the air out. And it has the characteristic of forming a column-like shape, which is often has a little spiral winding appearance in the bottom. But also, any air that is left trapped in the clay is arranged in a vertical wood grain-like orientation. But very fascinatingly, because these 2 were cut with a saw, you can actually see that sort of vertical linear grain showing in the clay itself. These lines that run up and down. Another thing that would place these models into his hands rather than an assistant or associates are the shaping of the arms. This is probably a piece of clay rolled between the fingers and attached at the shoulder and integrated. And then the shaping is carried out by pushing his fingers around the circumference of the limb rather than exclusively up and down. It yields a different appearance and surface. He had a habit of modeling the back of the head and the neck of his terracottas by making a little pinch with his thumb and forefinger. And that's very clearly visible here, where if you see my thumbnail fits right into that groove, and the other finger pinches that neck, and it teases out this descending hair that travels down the neck. Fairly uniformly, he seems to have applied the drapery in strips, almost as if he was dressing a figure. And things like the superscription or scroll, he would have added separately out of pieces of clay. Features a very small oval tipped modeling tool is something that he used very often on the eyes and mouth and other facial features to just pick them out very quickly from the soft clay. A tool such as this, or a similar tool, but having a blunted tip rather than a sharp one like that, he may have used in the drapery, for example, in these. This is exactly the kind of tool that he used to draw these marks and create these drapery folds, having a softly rounded bottom So he used these oval tips, both sharp and rounded, in various sizes. These tools were all made from measurements or silicone rubber casts from Bernini's sculpture. So we know that these oval tip tools and these toothed tip tools were also used in the production of both the small scale models and the large ones. By playing the raking light over the surface, you can see very clearly some techniques where these interior wing feathers, something that shows up on almost all of these models, they're simply two balls of clay that were smoothed down one at a time with his hand. You see it on this model here, in exactly the same gesture. In this case, moving from bottom to top, because the fingerprint is left at the end of the stroke. So we know that Bernini pushed this blob of clay up with his thumb or perhaps another finger. And when he took his finger away, that's when the fingerprint was left in the clay. And there's a rather handsome fingerprint in the clay right there, which would be completely invisible without the raking light to make it clear.
One last characteristic that I think really aligns this with Bernini, you see this flattening of the limbs of the shins of both of these and these big, long feet. And it was quite a tendency of Bernini in his later years to really elongate the proportions of his figures. Some scholars have thought it reflects some sort of deeper spirituality of Bernini, that he was really thinking about these angels in a superhuman way. But I also think in this particular case, he's really thinking about the geometries of the figures, and by having these long limbs, he's really thinking about how they relate to one another in a visual sense across space. But you just don't see other sculptors doing this, thinking in this geometric way that Bernini is, with these flat shins, these big old sort of webbed feet. Absolutely idiosyncratic of Bernini.
One of the most remarkable things about these is their abbreviation and their sketchiness, and his ability to leave it alone, to not push it so far, to make something that wasn't perfect, that wasn't completely refined or finished. These are literally the embodiment of an idea created in some probably as short as a few hours, maybe others being draped carefully with a damp fabric and kept overnight and revisited or reworked.
Exactly, but this is what we love about them, that they have this connection that between hand and mind seems infinitesimally small when you look at works like this. When you look at his finished sculptures, they look more labored. The assistants are working on them, they have a degree of finish, but here you're capturing the essence of the genius, the artist's touch, and literally, the touch everywhere. You see the fingerprints on the thigh of this one. You can follow his hands, his gestures precisely. And when you're able to put them in a series and see how the designs change as you do in the exhibition, then you're able to really follow the mind of the sculptor and understand his concerns and what he's trying to think about from the very beginning all the way through the final design. It's the energy, it's the heavens, it's the upward momentum, and bringing that sort of, indeed spirituality directly to his figural type.